In this video, we will cover how to commit a quote once we've selected the quote that we intend to use for a given buyout package. So previously in the other videos, we added vendors to a given quote group and ultimately selected Porter Concrete as the vendor that we intend to use. Now we could also have done that with any number of other quote groups as well, so we don't have to necessarily do this next step we're about to talk about on a one-on-one basis. So we might have gone through it perhaps and selected vendors for a number of different quote groups. And so when we click on the commit step, if we had selected other vendors, then we would see a grid listing them all out here. Of course, at this point in time, I've only selected one quote to issue a commitment form. Hence why we only see the one listed here. So for our miscellaneous concrete products, we decided on Porter Concrete as the vendor. I can see that that quote has a status of selected at this point. I can see the line items listed out down below. In this case, though, it's showing me the line items coded based on the job cost coding that came over with the estimate. So I can see how that's going to be reflected on the ERP system side. So at this stage, in order to complete the process of committing this quote and setting it up as a purchase order in this case, there are a couple of pieces of information that are still needed. The first being the vendor ID. Now you might be wondering, we've already selected Porter Concrete, so why do we still have to identify the vendor? The answer to that question is that Sage Estimating has its own address book, and the identifiers in that database are different than the identifiers that uniquely identify vendors in your accounting database, even though it might be the same vendor list. So we simply need to make that connection, and this is a connection that we make one time. So right now, buyout basically is saying, hey, we know we've selected Porter Concrete for this particular purchase order, but we don't know who Porter Concrete is on the accounting side. So we're going to click the ellipsis button, and this gives me a little explanation at the top indicating that the company for this quote was selected from the Sage Estimating address book. In order to create a commitment in Sage 300 Construction Real Estate, you must identify the corresponding company or vendor from Sage 300 Construction Real Estate. Now again, once we do that, then from that point forward, buyout knows how those two records are linked between estimating and accounting. We don't have to specify that every time. But right now we do need to specify that, so I'm going to click the ellipsis button, and this is showing me a list of all the vendors that are in Sage 300 Construction Real Estate, along with their vendor codes. Now I think in my example case I probably picked poorly in that I don't think we actually have Porter Concrete in the Sage 300 sample data, so I'm just going to kind of cheat here and say they actually go by another name of Northwest Concrete. That's the same company, let's pretend. Okay, so and I can also see if there's an address listed for them as well, and just use that as further confirmation that I've actually picked the right one. And sure, Tillamook is the same as Beaverton. Well, not really, but I would be able to at least visually see that at the top I've picked Porter Concrete. At the bottom, ideally, I've picked Porter Concrete. Hey, it's the same address and everything. I can confirm that that's the same. We're talking about the same company in Sage Estimating and in accounting. So once I've made that link, I click OK, and it drops in the vendor code. So now that piece of information is satisfied. Knowing that buyout is not going to allow me to create the commitment until it has the information that it needs. So it would actually stop me if I tried to create a commitment and there's no vendor ID assigned. The next piece of information is the commitment number, and this is going to be dependent on your buyout settings. So if I go back to this file menu, go to operations options. Right now I do not have this box checked to use the system assigned commitment ID. What that means is that if the system's not assigning the commitment ID, the user must do it. And that's why this is an input field right here for the user to type in whatever commitment number they choose to assign to this purchase order. Buyout will validate that against the live Sage 300 data. So if you type in a commitment number that is already in Sage 300, it will stop you. Likewise, if you type in a number that is not valid, meaning maybe it's too long or something like that, it will also stop you. So it would not pass validation. So if I didn't want to manually assign it, let's say, for example, let's just close this buyout package. Okay, and we'll go back to our operations options, check this box, and again, as we discussed in an earlier video, we have some control over how it's going to assign the auto-generated ID. So as an example, I could, for purchase orders, let's prefix those with PO. So PO, job number, dash, 4 digits. Again, as we discussed before, that needs to fit within 12 digits. So I can see that we have 2 there plus 5, so that's 7. That's 8 plus 4, so that's exactly 12. So that fits within the allowed length of the commitment number field in job cost. So that's acceptable. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click OK on that, and let's reopen the buyout package. And we'll go back to the commit step, and now we notice that the commitment number is blank, so it doesn't appear to have auto-assigned, right? The reality is that that number is not automatically assigned until we actually tell buyout to create the commitment in job costs. And the reason it's not assigned until that point is simply to make sure that the buyout is assigning the next commitment number as it's creating them, to make sure that we're deriving a unique number in the database each time. So with that set, we're good to go ahead and create the commitment. Keep in mind in this beta version, and when I check this box, I do have to currently navigate off of that column before it recognizes that the box is checked, and that's something that we'll be fixing soon here. So now that I've checked that box indicating that I want to create this commitment, and again, the reason that the UI is built this way is there could very well be 20 of these, right? The 20 different commitments listed out here that we want to create, and we could go through and check off the ones that we want to do right now, or check them all off, or do them one at a time. So you have complete control over which commitments get created at this stage, but it gives you that option to check them off and determine which ones are going to get created right now. So I'll go up to the toolbar and click on Create Commitments. And just wants to confirm we need to create one commitment in Sage 300 Construction Real Estate. And so I'll click Yes. And okay, and this is something I will come back to right after this video, because this issue actually was encountered previously and was resolved, and it should be resolved in this version. So we will we'll tackle that one and get that nailed down. But anyway, basically once this issue gets resolved, what will happen here is you will see the commitment number will drop in automatically based on what got created, and the status will change to committed. You'll also see a recap report come up indicating that listing out all the commitments that got created, as well as any notification messages that come from Sage about other things to be mindful of. And for example, it might indicate that the committed value exceeds the estimate, or there could be other information about the fact that it added new cost codes to the job based on the standard cost code list, and just informational things like that. Okay, once we have created the commitments, which I can't do at this point, unfortunately, then we would be free to create documents. And the reason we have to do this in this order is because, again, the commitment number is not known until after we've committed it. At that point, once the commitment number has been assigned, we can create documents, which I can't do at this point, but that will produce a purchase order document in this case that lists out all the items in a format very similar to the request for quote view that we looked at earlier. That is currently a hard-coded purchase order form, a hard-coded report. Again, we have plans to introduce some customization options and allow you to use other tools to produce that document as well. Also keeping in mind that this is a SQL database, so you do already have the ability to connect to that database through external tools and, to produce reports and forms and whatnot if you so choose to do that. Okay, so that I think takes care of the commit step. Again, each one of these grids, as before, has an option to show or hide details. Not sure where there are no details on that step, but so I think that concludes this part. As always, you can click on the review step to see where we're at in the process. Had I been able to actually complete the commit step for that last operation, then these 11 items would have moved up here to the buyout line, and it would have indicated that I was a certain percentage of the way done with my buyout process. And so that's kind of the point of this step, is just to be able to click in there and see where we're at any given point in time. So the last video I think in the series that we will cover coming up next would just be a quick review of the reports menu, and that will conclude the series.